And so one of the things that we are analyzing actually right now, this is hot off the presses yesterday. This is from, I don't want to go backwards, but at the very top of the Chesapeake Bay where the Susquehanna River feeds into it is one of our main study areas on a Army base called Foraging Proving Ground. And they're the ones that are funding most of this study. So we're looking at the finer details of how eagles are using their property. And if you look at, this is all the eagle locations are going into this analysis. So there's 60, 70 eagles going into this. And what we're looking at is where are the hot spots? Where are they concentrating? So logically, they're on the shorelines. So they're sitting there looking for fish, looking for waterfowl. What's really neat about this is, so this is the summertime. This is what they're doing in the summer. So they're on the shorelines. This is the wintertime.
So you can see
they've moved up into the creeks.
Here, moved up in the creek here, up in the creek there.
And they're seeking out areas that are protected from the winter storms. So they're looking for areas that maybe have a vegetative buffer. If they're up the creeks, they're not getting the wind that's whipping up through the Chesapeake Bay. So for management purposes, for the landowner that's paying for the study and who's trying to do their best effort not to disturb eagles, it's important for them to know that the eagles in the summertime, if they're doing any training along the shoreline, that's going to be potentially more likely to disturb eagles than if they're on that same shoreline in the wintertime, because the birds are going to be somewhere else in the wintertime. So we've tracked a number of breeding eagles, which do really different things, which has been really interesting. We've always assumed that they're non-migratory in the Chesapeake Bay. They do migrate, of course, from other populations, but here in the Bay we're assuming they're not migratory. And what we did find is that they do these exploratory flights. And this is that same base. This is a home range, just a real simple home range. In green, those are the GPS transmitter locations, like the ones that he shows on his maps on the blog. And the green circle in the center is where they're really concentrated. It just happens to be that's where the nest is, so that makes sense. But you can see the birds, moved out, tip on owls or show off. So that's the basic home range. So that green circle in the center is about 2 miles or so. So you can gauge, the birds are keeping pretty close to the nest. Now here at the gardens, we don't have a transmitter on the adults, so we don't know what their exact home range is. But sometimes you can also use this to infer, use the juvenile birds from that nest to infer what the adults might be doing in the predispersal period. So in green, that's Azalea, and red, that is Camillia, and those are points. Those are points before they have dispersed. So after they've fledged the nest, but before they've left to go seek out water pastures. We do that same analysis and we see that there's 3 real hot spots. The birds hang around the nest quite a bit, which makes sense. The green area in the center is what I think is called the dump, where they have all the compost materials. Birds spend a lot of time there. And then there's also this area in red, which I don't exactly know what's there. Maybe Reese can chime in. Sorry, with the cup. But it's very close to a road there. It looks like maybe in a neighborhood. So this is that same bird that I showed before with the kind of rainbow home range there. If you zoom out, the bird has taken an exploratory flight all up the Susquehanna River all the way up to 3 Mile Island. And for those of you who remember that nuclear disaster, where we saw the bird fly up there and we're watching it, and we're like, no, turn around. But this was an excursion that she took in the non-breeding season. She was gone for about a week, and she came right back to the nest. That was the only time that she left. So it's interesting. And that's, again, her main concentration of where she's hanging out. This is a different female that we caught in the same general area. So most of her locations are up there where it says nest. But she took one exploratory flight in the non-breeding season, went down to Blackwater, made a big loop, and came right back to the nest. And her area is actually probably even more concentrated there, just around the nest, but she took this one exploratory flight. So it's really interesting, you know, when you look at, say that you're here at the garden, you see them day in, day out, pretty much, but sometimes you may not always see them, especially during the summer, and you're wondering, where do they go? Well, who knows? They could be taking some of these flights to check out new places, maybe see if there's a fish run somewhere, or who knows?
Visit a cousin.
Go visit Aunt Annie. And then we have these adults that are not breeding, and we know they're not breeding.
Teamwork.
All right. So we've got these birds that we're calling floaters. That's a ecological term. It's birds that are not tied to a breeding site, that are of mature breeding age. And they tend to move around and wreak havoc. In some cases, like here, you've got what we might call intruders. But this particular bird is really interesting. So this is the same time period as the other two birds that I showed you. But the difference is that it's not tied to a breeding territory. And you can see the difference here. So this is basically the entire eastern part of Maryland this bird has traversed. I mean, it's just amazing. And when you look at that same home range, it's concentrating in various areas, kind of show you where it's spending most of its time. And so, you know, we assume at some point, I keep looking every year to see if the bird is going to set up shop and you know, settle down and you know, build a nest in one of these locations. But so far, it seems to be ranging. And this bird is at least 10 years old now. We caught it as an adult in full adult plumage, and that was 5 years ago. So it's been, you know, 5 years of roaming around. And part of it is just, are there enough breeding locations? Are there enough areas that they can settle in? We just don't know. But you can imagine for a nest here at the Botanical Gardens that maybe has an open slot and they're, you know, advertising for new females. You've got birds like this. You've got birds like this that are ranging all over the landscape, and they happen to come across a nest like this that has an opening. Imagine there's, you know, lots of these eagles around that are doing this. So give you some perspective on, you know, the larger population that might be filtering in here. So this is one of our fun trap sites where we're trapping over roadkill deer. The young do some really, really cool interactions, a lot of behavior where they're trying to dominate each other. The females, of course, dominate the males. The northern birds, which are much bigger, dominate our local birds here. The adults, funny enough, are not necessarily more dominant. It's really the females that are more dominant. So it's fun to see a first-year female get out there and just wreak havoc on an adult male who you think would be the dominant one. But one of the things that I've really enjoyed learning about eagles is these non-breeders, they just do so many different things. They're not tied to a nest, so they're moving all over the place, they're interacting with each other, and they're forming communal roosts. So these areas where we have concentrations of birds moving in to take advantage of the prey resources, they're also forming communal roosts in those same sites. And so communal roosts, for those of you guys who don't know, are places, or they are formed in various things, various times in raptor ecology. Gosh, I didn't say that right. Various times during the raptor life cycle, and during the migration period is one of the big ones. Up here in the top right, these are swallowtail kites. And down in the southern states, like in Louisiana and in Florida, they form these communal roosts right before they migrate. And they'll be there for a couple of weeks and form up into the thousands of birds that will come into one place. and then they all start migrating together. It's pretty neat. So here in the Chesapeake Bay, we see communal roosts when birds come here to winter, and then also just our non-breeding birds during the breeding season will also form these communal roosts. And they're thought to provide information. So maybe a new bird who just came out of a nest, it's his first time on the wing, he doesn't know where to go, he doesn't know where the good foraging sites are, goes to a roost and starts interacting with other birds and follows them. It's not a, hey, where's the food, but literally sees where the birds are all, okay, they're all leaving the roost in the morning, they're flying east, maybe I should go east too, that's probably where the food is. And they start to learn from other birds where the food is on the landscape. It's also thought that roosts are also providing a form of social interaction. So eagles are learning how to be eagles. They may be forming pair bonds for future nesting. And then this is a site in the wintertime. I think these might be, I think those are vultures. It's hard to tell the quality of the image, but it's thought that also these roosts are also providing thermoregulation, and not necessarily that the birds are sitting right next to each other and huddling, although some birds do that, but they are providing a place of refuge, basically, from the winter weather. So the communal roosts in the bay that we found with our tracking data, and also just with our aerial surveys, we see them pretty often. So we know of over 300 right now in the bay, and pretty phenomenal how many there are. You see a place like Norfolk is pretty bare just because of the number of people that are here in developed areas. And there may be very small communal roosts, but there aren't going to be the large ones until you really get into these areas where, in the concentration areas where you see a lot of birds. One of the really neat things that we've been finding out is that there are roosts and nests coexisting in the same place. And you have to wonder, what's the advantage of this? So sometimes it's the roost that forms first and the nest is then built inside the roost, or it's the nest was there and the roost forms around the nest. Either way, you have to imagine the nesting pair here, like at the one at the gardens, they're constantly having to keep alert for other adults to protect their chicks. And when you're in a roost, you can have 200 eagles sleeping around you at night. What do you do? How do you maintain the boundary of your territory? You can't. It's just impossible. You'd spend all your time defending and no time eating or feeding your chicks. So it's a real interesting thing that we're seeing. And we're also, we've documented with video cameras at nests that these roosts are providing predators, evil predators, that are actually coming in and killing the chicks at these nests that are in the roosts. So it is a definite risk.
This is Libby and Reese. Do you guys mind if I post your presentations on YouTube?
Yes, that's fine.
Reese, okay?
Yep.
Thank you.